The Knicks head coach search goes on, and after a lot of flirting with some coaches that already have jobs, they now are ready to move into the next phase of their coaching search. I've got all the intel from all the various people coming up right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at strick.land. And today's show is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So on today's show, what else would I be talking about? The Knicks coaching search. I want to start talking about the draft at some point, but this coaching search, the Knicks, as it turns out, only team in the NBA with a coaching vacancy right now. So they're the only team being talked about in terms of who they're looking at for a coach. And that means there's just updates flying fast and furious every day. So got to get through a lot of updates today from the previous day here that have informed us, I think, quite a bit on where the Knicks might be looking with their coaching search. So that's a lot of great stuff on today's episode, including why all of the incumbent coaches that they've spoken to have now not been given permission, from what it seems like, to speak to them, and where they go from here, who they look at, and also my updated thoughts on what I think they ultimately do here with their coaching search. But first, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. All right, so updates on where the Knicks stand in their coaching search. So a few notes first here. So Shams Charania of ESPN says another one. The New York Knicks have requested permission to speak with Atlanta Hawks head coach Quinn Snyder, but were firmly denied. Sources tell ESPN. Mark Stein says the Knicks have now formally requested permission to speak to Mavericks, and this is a hilarious faux pas, assistant coach Jason Kidd, and the request was denied by Dallas. League sources tell Mark Stein and Dallas Sports. And then Casey Johnson of the Chicago Sports Network said the Knicks requested permission to speak to Billy Donovan for their coaching vacancy, but were denied per sources. The Bulls value Donovan highly for his coaching acumen, communication skills, and ability to connect with players and all members of the organization. Elsewhere, of course, in previous days, it's been reported that the Knicks were rebuffed on asking to speak to Chris Finch of the Minnesota Timberwolves, to Ime Udoka of the Houston Rockets. So there's a lot going on in terms of the Knicks trying to talk to incumbent head coaches around the league. And I think the lesson that we can get here now is that maybe all of this Jason Kidd smoke and all the smoke about various employed candidates around the league was perhaps just that, just smoke, just the Knicks doing due diligence. Ian Begley did a TV spot on SNY and had a pretty good point here, which was that the Knicks are just kind of kicking the tires on everything. Begley said they're turning over every stone. They're trying to get an idea of who is and who isn't available. He referred to it as a facts-finding mission. And he said what they don't want to happen is, let's say they hire a Frank Vogel. Now, that's not a name I've heard a lot, but that is just the name that he floated out there as a hypothetical. But he said, let's say they hire a Frank Vogel and then find out Jason Kidd was available. That would be a big mistake. But also know the Mavericks have no reason to grant that permission. But behind the scenes, that saber rattling could still happen in terms of Kidd, kind of forcing his way out of town, which again, maybe that's why that scenario gained the most traction out of all of them. Just the fact that everyone's brought up and I've brought up and Gavin's brought up and whatever, that the Jason Kidd has a precedent of forcing his way out of a coaching situation rather abruptly, with the Nets moving to the Bucks a number of years ago. So, it's not completely out of the question that he would potentially try to force his way out. But there's been all kinds of evidence, including, the Mavs hiring a new lead assistant and Nico Harrison apparently telling said person that Jason Kidd is in place and not going to be on the move. I guess we've seen him move guys that we thought were not necessarily going to be on the move before just this past season, and Luka Doncic. So maybe take it with a grain of salt, but I'm kind of inclined to believe they want to stick with Jason Kidd. They're happy with him. He did just bring them to the finals a season ago, and it seems to me like they're pretty locked in with him and want him to be the voice for Cooper Flagg and to coach this Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis tandem, and hopefully try to get after a championship and hopefully get to the finals again. So I don't know. I think the Kid thing, I'm willing to, at least at this point, until further notice, just kind of rule that as that was smoke. That was just, it was something that the Knicks kicked the tires on, and then some places ran with it and, took that as, hey, they're super duper interested. And in reality, hey, maybe they would have given him an interview or whatever, but I don't know that this was like a silver platter situation where they were prepared to just, like, if they got permission with Jason Kidd, they were prepared to just serve up the job to him and say, hey, here you go. Actually, there's a really nice note from Christian Winfield of the New York Daily News, couple paragraphs here that sort of zero in on where that all stands. So Winfield says the Leon Rose led front office remains, quote, singularly focused on winning a championship. I think that was Leon's own words from the press release. Winfield then continues, with no active competition for available candidates, the Knicks are prepared to wait. They believe multiple qualified options remain on the board. And with the 2024 to 25 season still in the middle of the NBA Finals, the Knicks are using the time to evaluate every possible path forward. With Ott, that's Jordan Ott, formerly of the Cavs, off the board, and Quinn Snyder, Jason Kidd, Ime Udoka, and Finch all unavailable. Chris Finch all unavailable. Former Knicks assistant Johnnie Bryant remains a top candidate. So are several experienced coaches who were let go during the season, including Mike Brown of Sacramento, Mike Malone, formerly of Denver, Mike Budenholzer, formerly of Phoenix, and Taylor Jenkins, formerly of Memphis. So that's from Christian Winfield. So, I think that's kind of roughly where I'm standing at the moment, which is the Knicks are for once. I mean, I feel like typically when you look at the NBA landscape, there's usually, going into any given offseason, multiple head coach vacancies. There's, multiple teams that are looking to add a coach, which creates a little bit of a sense of urgency to get your interviews done, to lock in on your candidate, to make your offer, to get them, in place and whatever. The Knicks sort of don't have that. And actually, it works pretty well for them, I think, to be able to just canvas the league, really take their time, show no sense of urgency, and like Christian Winfield says there, they're not really in a position where they feel like they have to scramble or do anything too quickly here. So yeah, I'm pretty good with where the Knicks are at right now. I think it's just going to require on the part of the Knicks, and then maybe more so, it seems like the Knicks don't have any issue being patient, but maybe more so on the part of the fans and content creators and even reporters to just show a little patience. I think we're seeing things start to come into focus a little bit here, and it seems like for the most part, what we've seen for the last week since Tibbs was fired is just the Knicks canvassing the league for any employed people. So they've gone down the list of all the guys that currently have jobs in the NBA that they would have potentially wanted to be their head coach. They've called all of their incumbent teams. All the incumbent teams have said, no, thank you. We like our coach. That's why we hired him. And the Knicks said, okay, good to know. Well, I guess we'll just keep moving on then. But there's some other great updates from Ian Begley, and our buddy CP the Franchise of Knicks Fan TV had some really good insight in a show that he did with Kevin O'Connor just yesterday. So I want to get into some of those and more when we get back in to Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to let you all know about our friends over at Game Time. And there's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. And I said this yesterday. I'll probably say it throughout the rest of the finals. I'm not going to read the next part of this ad copy. I'm just going to ad lib because they want me to talk about the NBA playoffs. But look, I know who I'm talking to here. These are Knicks fans. No Knicks fan is going to go to Indianapolis or Oklahoma City to go watch the NBA finals. I don't think so. Instead, let me tell you about I just used Game Time yesterday and went with my buddy Matt, got some great seats to the Mets game. I we decided kind of last minute. Like he texted me at like 2 p.m. Was like, hey, you want to go to the game tonight? And I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And I went on Game Time, found some amazing seats for such a great deal. I think it was $120 all in for each seat to sit 2 rows back behind home plate at the very front of the 300 section. Gorgeous view of that, of the two Brandon Nimmo home runs, the Juan Soto home run. Just a lovely, lovely evening of baseball. So, hey, all apologies to the NBA playoffs that they want me to talk about, but go get some basketball tickets right now on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, I'm back in, continuing to go through all the notes that have come out in the last 24-ish hours about the Knicks coaching search. It's been a lot. And as I was kind of alluding to in the last segment, I think what's happening right now is a lot of the people that are plugged in are now getting word that, oh, in fact, the Knicks were not singularly focused on like Jason Kidd or Chris Finch or Ime Udoka or whomever that has come out in the last week. In fact, what's actually been happening is that they're just doing their due diligence on the guys that are currently employed, and now we're starting to hear about, the candidates that they're going to look at in earnest now that they kind of have been rebuffed on anybody who already has a job in the NBA. Now they're going to look at the guys that don't have head coaching jobs and start to make decisions on what they want to do there in terms of who they want to interview, who they want to bring in. So a lot of names are floating around. There was some good notes from Ian Begley on TV, although it's interesting. There's a little bit of conflicting information from CP from Knicks Fan TV and Ian Begley, which I'll get into right now. So Ian said there was no shoe in when they fired Tom Thibodeau. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. I already mentioned that he said they were kicking the tires on everything, turning over every stone, all that. Good to hear. I don't understand why people are against. Real quick side rant. I don't understand why people are against the idea of a thorough coaching search. Like I've been seeing people online freaking out that like I even saw like a clip from the NBA Finals last night of Charles Barkley talking about the Knicks, and I'm uh, like, he was saying like something to the effect of like, they don't have a plan. They're idiots. They don't have a plan. You fired the guy and you don't have a plan. It's like, what? Like, how many scenarios have there ever been in the NBA where a coach is fired and the front office has an immediate plan for one person that they're ready to hire instantly in that moment? Like, it's not free agency. It's not trades. This is not player movement. This is a coach. It's very different. The rules of engagement are totally different. Things are not decided in minutes, like they are sometimes with player decisions where you've got another GM on the line and that there's a trade offer on the table and they say you kind of got to take it or leave it here because I got other offers, whatever. Okay, fine. Make a sort of split decision on the future of the team via the players. No, this is a coaching decision. I've literally never in my life seen a situation where a team has had to make a coaching decision or has made a coaching decision like within like days of firing their coach and just had one candidate that they're super locked in on that they say, let's do it. Other than occasionally, and I think we've seen this already this offseason. Sometimes there will be a fired coach and then the interim steps in, does a really good job. So then the team hits the offseason. They say, all right, how do we feel about the interim coach versus do we want to do a whole search? And then they go, yeah, you know what? We really liked what the interim coach did. Let's hire this guy and just move forward here. Okay, fine. You can understand that because they've already had their job interview, which is, half a season, quarter of a season, whatever, the playoffs in the case of a couple coaches this year that were given the playoffs to kind of have their tryout and impress their teams. Cool. That'll happen sometimes. But this weird expectation that the Knicks were just gonna, move on from their coach of 5 years, uh, state out loud. I mean, for all the things that the Knicks don't state out loud, Leon Rose doesn't like speak to the media or whatever. They release a statement saying, "We want a championship. This is what we want to do. Our next head coach, we're going to get with the mind of we want to win a championship." And now to hear like, how dare they not just have? It's essentially just what it comes down to for most of the people that are commenting on this. It comes down to, I'm impatient. Give me my coach already. And it's like, that's not how this works. That's not how any job interview process works. If you, whatever company you work at, if they're just hiring the first person they see all the time, you probably don't work at a good company. So everybody stop complaining. This goes to anyone listening to this who's had the Twitter fingers active. This goes to anyone in the space, any content creators, whatever, any reporters even that are complaining on TV or on streams or podcasts or whatever, being like, "Well, I don't understand why they didn't find someone already." They're the only game in town. They have their pick of the litter as far as coaches right now. Of course, they're going to want to turn over every stone, kick every tire, whatever other metaphor, simile, whatever you want to make. They're going to do all that. But anyway, so here's the note from Ian Begley. He said, quickly on Mike Malone and on Johnnie Bryant, I don't think either of them are in the top tier of that Nick list. If there is a list, things can obviously change, but I think that's where it sits right now. He did also mention Mike Brown and Taylor Jenkins, but he phrased it, and Ian is usually pretty careful with how he phrases things. He phrased it more like they should bring those guys in for an interview, meaning Mike Brown and Taylor Jenkins, but not necessarily that they have brought them in or that they will bring them in. So I don't think that he's necessarily heard anything in terms of them officially looking into those two guys. But I mean, it does make sense to assume that, given the fact that they are experienced head coaches, and we keep hearing that their preference is for an experienced head coach, or at least that some in the organization, their preference is for an experienced head coach. Um, I think that it makes sense that they would potentially look at a Mike Brown and a Taylor Jenkins and give them an interview. I think Begley also said something about Mike Woodson, which was fun. He said that on another show, I believe. I don't think it was on the SNY clip that he did that I listened to for most of these quotes, but he mentioned Mike Woodson somewhere else too. I think just saying, wouldn't be surprised if they reach out because the organization has ties to him, which, yeah, I get that. I mean, they've literally this front office has literally hired Mike Woodson before, and then as one of Tibbs's head assistants, and then of course he left for Indiana, and then now is no longer at Indiana. I don't know if that inspires the most confidence in terms of bringing him back to be the head coach again, but I mean, maybe a candidate to come back and sit on the bench if they do hire a less experienced candidate, which brings me to CP from Knicks Fan TV, CP the franchise. Shout out to CP, friend of the show. CP was pretty definitive on this, so this is actually interesting. So, well, actually, this matches with Ian Begley, where Begley said that Malone is not a candidate. CP pretty definitively said too, Mike Malone is not a candidate. He used the term Tibbs clone as far as how some people in the organization view him, and then mentioned that there's possibly some tension surrounding Mike Malone, that he wouldn't want to come to the Knicks. If you ask me, that probably has something to do with the fact that Mike Malone is very vocally a friend of Tibbs. They came up in the coaching ranks together with, ironically, the Knicks in the 90s, under Van Gundy. And, I think there's probably something there in terms of he probably just kind of took them off his list at the start. I mean, Malone has been on TV as well. So I think maybe, he's probably like, I'm comfortable just being on TV for a year if that's what it takes, and then can see if there's head coaching vacancies next year, can make a nice paycheck and have a lower workload for a year, and he spend time with his family or whatever, and then go back at it next year if he really doesn't want the Knicks job. It sounds like all intents and purposes, he does not want the Knicks job, and the Knicks maybe don't want him either. So I guess we can write him off. It seems like enough people that I trust are saying Mike Malone is off the board. So that's good to know. CP also said he highly doubted that Van Gundy would be a candidate. So I guess take that off the board. Although I've been openly fantasy booking having Jeff Van Gundy be a lead assistant on this team because he's done an amazing job with the Clippers from what it seems like. And I like Jeff Van Gundy. That was the coach of the first team I ever fell in love with the Knicks. But setting my personal feelings aside, it seems like Jeff Van Gundy is not likely to be the head coach. Who knows about maybe assistant coach, but definitely not likely to be the head coach. But this is where CP differs from Ian Begley, which is key. He says Johnnie Bryant has a lot of fans in this organization and is still in the running for this thing. I think you could see Johnnie Bryant with a veteran head coach be given an opportunity to take this team to the promised land. A lot of fans of Johnnie Bryant, a lot of fans in terms of fans in the organization. I think that is important stuff. I'll give CP props, man. He has been, I think, one of the most plugged in guys and has really kind of found his spot as one of the lead voices in terms of insider info on the team. So if he says that Johnnie Bryant has a lot of fans in the organization, if he says that Johnnie Bryant is a strong candidate, I'm inclined to believe that we've been, I don't want to say misled, but maybe the media at large has been a little misled about where the Knicks priorities lie, and that they might be more into Johnnie Bryant than a lot of people think, and that, they're just doing their due diligence, making sure that they see who all is available. But it seems like to me, once so here's my read on the situation is that the interview process has not started yet. Once the interview process starts, I would be extremely surprised if Johnnie Bryant does not get an interview, and if he is not a strong candidate, probably in the top 3 or whatever when they start whittling down their list. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to come down to how these interviews go and all that. So I want to give some more thoughts on that. I want to give uh, updated predictions on where I think this whole thing is going, and then we have a merciful update on the Kevin Durant situation, where it seems like uh, predictably, in my opinion, Kevin Durant probably will not be headed to the Knicks. So, getting to that in just a second when we get back into Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to let you all know about our friends over at WayFair. And there's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. And I've been pretty vocal with this, of especially on any of these reads where I have to talk about home ownership. My wife and I got a new place this year, and it's pretty great. It has actually a deck that we have to furnish and a walkout patio in the basement, which is pretty cool. So we have a walkout basement, which is right like 10 feet from where my basement office is now. And we need some new furniture. We moved from a much smaller place. I've been looking on Wayfair. I haven't quite pulled the trigger on what I want to get just yet, but I've got some ideas, and I'm looking forward to getting kind of a hybrid conversation set, dining set. I want it to feel like a living room, but kind of have a table, almost like a living room with tray tables. You know what I mean? That's what I want. I want it to be comfortable when I have guests over, but also be able to make some burgers on the grill and serve them up, and have people be able to eat them. So I've kind of just been waiting till I see that perfect set. But I got to pull the trigger soon. It is summer. I'm going to start having people over for barbecue soon. So I got to make that decision on Wayfair soon. That's why you shouldn't wait, and I won't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now and shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, folks, let's put a bow on all this news for today, right? So I've introduced all the news. I've given one rant admonishing anybody for being impatient, which I'll just say again, please be patient. It's just, oh my goodness, even just our YouTube comments, reading through, just the amount that people forget how a coach search works at every level. that I've seen during this search so far, I'm just astounded. It's like, do people not even remember how the coach search that led to Tibbs went? Like that was considered a relative slam dunk for Tibbs. And yet the Knicks still they interviewed tons of people. I'm trying to remember what the total list was, but I know that I'm fairly certain that Mike Woodson interviewed for head coach, eventually got one of those lead bench spots. Of course, Kenny Atkinson was the finalist with Tibbs, but they interviewed like a large handful of other candidates in that search too. And it was a labored search. And I think it was a genuine decision between Kenny Atkinson and Tom Thibodeau for that job back in 2020. So I don't know. I don't fully understand why everyone is freaking out that the Knicks have not hired someone within what 12 days, 13 days, whatever, since firing Tibbs. Not even. Yeah, I don't know. It has not been a long time. So calm down. First off, everyone calm down. But secondly, reading the tea leaves on what's happening here, I think basically, I said in the last segment, I think that basically they're getting ready to actually start their interview process, and good on them. They should interview people because I think what's going to ultimately happen, they're going to have their short list going in, but I think they're going to expand that short list, interview all possible candidates again to just kind of put everything together from this whole episode and everything that we know. They have the only head coaching opportunity in the entire NBA right now. If you ask me, look, some people will probably say, "Oh, it's a pressure cooker. Oh, New York fans. Oh, New York media. Oh, it scares people off." I don't think there's okay, I won't say there isn't a single. I think there are very few head coaches that would look at a team that just made the Eastern Conference Finals that most people with eyeballs could look at. Like if a dingus like me can look at what the Knicks did in the Eastern Conference Finals and during the playoffs and say, I think they've got the talent to potentially make the finals, but the execution was clearly off. Like there were some things that were just clearly not schemed properly, whatever with this team in terms of how they approached certain end game scenarios. And that was another thing that Ian Begley kind of like heard that he reported on yesterday, that people in the organization, whether it was players, whether it was people in the front office, were kind of concerned that there were too many late game scenarios that were just not practiced and not discussed and not game planned for in the Tibbs regime, which I think we can all agree on. Like if we're at that point and can say, hey, like this team has all the talent in the world, but just needs the right person to lead them, and you might be looking at an NBA Finals team, and now seeing also, with thinking like, hey, the West looks pretty formidable. Maybe it's going to be tough for the East to win a championship for a couple years. Now seeing Indy regrettably up 2-1 on OKC in the finals. Like, I think any coach is looking at this roster and saying, hey, the team that possibly is going to win the finals this year got taken to 6 by this team with coaching that a lot of people say was suboptimal. I think this is an extremely attractive job. And I think that every possible available head coaching candidate, I say available because obviously they've kicked the tires on all the ones that aren't available, but I think every possible available coaching candidate will want to interview for this job. Why would you not want to interview for this job? It's the New York Knicks. You have a chance to become a coaching legend in potentially one season. Like whatever coach, if they win a championship for this team for the first time in 50 plus years, instant legend status. I'm not gonna lie, possible like almost instant Hall of Fame nod. Like it carries a lot of weight to be a championship coach in New York, given how long it's been since there has been one. And this team seems pretty primed to get there. I think the roster can be, if you scheme it properly, if you add some good depth this offseason, and I'm of the belief that if you basically stand pat and just improve around the margins, this team could be a championship team. You can also make a big splash, and maybe Leon Rose will do that. Maybe if the right deal comes up for someone like Giannis, who's a huge needle mover, and he says, I want to go to the Knicks, which we haven't seen anything to suggest that, but assuming that was the case and assuming that a team like the Bucks would want to work with him to get him to the Knicks, and you can build a team around him and Jalen Brunson, sure, maybe you give that a shot too. But I think even if you just stand pat and you just, use that 50th pick in the draft or potentially trade up a little bit and try to find a early to mid second round contributor under a new coach who, again, under a new coach, we don't have to assume anymore that rookies and second year players and whatever will have to put their time in and have 3 years of NBA service before they get a real role on the Knicks anymore. Because again, you're looking for a new head coach. Maybe find a new head coach who's more willing to potentially empower a younger player in their first year, no matter what their draft position was or whatever. But I think the Knicks, they have their pick here. They have a lot of head coaches that I think should be interested in this job. If head coaches aren't interested in this job, then fine. The Knicks shouldn't be interested in them. But I think it's an extremely attractive job. I think that this is a team that is ready with the roster that they have and just marginal improvements around the edges. Is a team that, like, if you squint hard enough, you say this might be an NBA Finals team, and who knows, maybe a championship team. You never know how things are going to go. Ultimately, you don't know how things are going to break. You don't know how injuries might happen that take a certain team out that you thought was a shoe in. Um, which was the case with both the 1 and 2 seed in the Eastern Conference this year, where injuries definitely derailed what the Cavs were able to do despite having an amazing regular season. And then obviously, I mean, I'll still contend. I think the Knicks probably win the series with the Celtics anyway, even if Tatum doesn't get injured. But Tatum gets injured, and that more or less minted the Knicks getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, I think that there's a real chance that this team could potentially be a championship level roster. I think any coach that they interview would see that. Where they go from here, I think Johnnie Bryant gets an interview. If I were them, I'd probably interview Taylor Jenkins. I think if you want to go anti Tibbs with it, I mean, Taylor Jenkins ran one of the longest rotations in the league throughout the year, did some of the most experimenting and everything else. I think that's good. Although there has been, I think I've seen some stuff about his offensive acumen maybe leaves a little to be desired in terms of how he runs the offense, but maybe that had something to do with personnel. I don't know. I mean, he's clearly run a team with a star point guard in John Morant and could run into roughly the same situation with the Knicks with Jalen Brunson. So I would get him in there. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, just bring everybody in. Bring in Mike Brown. Bring in Mike Woodson. Screw it. Bring him in. See what he has to say. I'm at the point where until proven otherwise, I don't think that the Leon Rose regime has made a truly bad decision yet in his tenure. So I'm not willing to freak out about anything until I see what coach they ultimately end up going with, and then honestly, ultimately see how it looks on the court next year, because these guys have earned the benefit of the doubt. But for now, we wait. We be patient, and we sit and we wait to see who the Knicks actually bring in for interviews, which I'm sure is news that we'll be hearing about probably in the next week and change. And I would assume that they'll probably want to lock this in maybe by draft time, maybe by the start of free agency, just so they can have that coaching input. But I also wouldn't be surprised if this waits until mid-July or something, if they decide, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll tailor the head coach we get around what we're able to do personnel-wise over the next few weeks, and make sure that they can find a coach that has the right vision for the players that they think are going to be on the team going into this next year. So who knows? We'll see. I think the number one lesson here is nobody truly knows anything at this moment. And I think that some things will start coming to light soon enough. So stay patient. Don't freak out. The Knicks will make this happen at some point or another soon. But till then, we'll have you covered on Locked On Knicks. Probably be back with some other news dump in a day or so. But till then, thank you all for listening. And I'll talk to you all soon. Peace out, everybody.